This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The greater threat to Western civilization. Is it voice assistants, Siri and Alexa, or dodgeball? Those are your choices.
Do you have Siri or Alexa?
No, because I'm not a
Hayek would be
sexist.
talking to it all day.
Because I'm not a sexist, that's why.
Oh, that's right.
Excuse me.
Excuse me.
146-page report from UNESCO that Siri, Alexa, Microsoft's Cortana, a patriarchal plot for male dominion over women. Quote from the authors. Most leading voice assistants are exclusively female or female by default, both in name and in sound of voice. That fact sends a signal that women are obliging, docile, eager to please helpers, available at the touch of a button or with a blunt voice command like hey or okay.
You have just figured out women. We are subservient.
The report identifies even more signals than that. It's more concerning. The assistant holds no power of agency beyond what the commander asks of it. It honors commands and responds to queries regardless of their tone or hostility. This, you see, reinforces gender biases that women are subservient and tolerant of poor treatment. And, of course, this also highlights the lack of women in tech, too, while we're at it.
Maybe we choose not to be in that field.
So that's candidate one. I'll just put it as a category. Siri, Alexa, and Cortana. They need to be felled in order to preserve Western civilization and the patriarchy. Meanwhile, a bunch of other deep thinkers are convening in Vancouver for the annual Congress of the Humanities and Social Sciences this week. They're presenting papers on everything from child marriage in Canada to why dodgeball is problematic. Children's games. You think they're innocent. Huh. Dupe. Tag singles out one poor participant, often the slowest child, as the dehumanized it who runs vainly in pursuit of the quicker ones. Capture the flag. Nakedly militaristic. But the real scourge with children's games,
What?
the game that embodies the 5 faces of oppression. You know them. Marion Young, University of Chicago.
What are the 5 faces of oppression?
Violence, exploitation, marginalization, powerlessness, cultural imperialism. Those 5 features, synonymous with dodgeball.
See, I use dodgeball as a training exercise for volleyball because you got to be quick on your feet. You got to move fast. And sorry, if you're slow, bye-bye, you're out. You're not playing.
My grade school gym teacher, Mr. Cashin, said we were going to play dodgeball. I said, no, you don't, sir. No, you don't. Not on my watch. I will not partake in this culturally imperialist activity.
I couldn't imagine having you as a student. It'd be fun, but it wouldn't be boring. But yeah. No, what's wrong? No, I know. Yeah, the weaker person gets bullied by other people because you got to move quick. It's an inspiration for you to try harder, Dan.
Excuse me.
Excuse me. I have 9 championships under my belt.
I refer you to Joy Butler, who is a professor of curriculum and pedagogy at the University of British Columbia. Quote, as we consider the potential of physical education to empower students by engaging them in critical and democratic processes, we conclude that the hidden curriculum offered by dodgeball, you call it, is antithetical to this project. It's anti-democratic, even when it reflects the choices of the strongest and most agile students. Dodgeball is indeed miseducative because it reinforces those 5 faces of oppression I mentioned. Thank you, Marion Young. Despite the fact that many physical educators understand their vital role in helping students develop robust, equal, productive relationships and critical awareness, their practices on the ground do not always reflect this agenda. We suggest that this tension becomes sharply visible in the common practice of allowing students to play dodgeball.
I love dodgeball, didn't you? I bet you were good at dodgeball.
Conscientious objector to dodgeball.
Oh.
Ahead of my time.
Just
Feminist.
admit when you did play dodgeball before, became culturally inappropriate. Were you good at dodgeball?
I was a savage. And
I'm sure.
And
yeah.
I said, I don't want to be that person anymore.
I'm sick of winning.
I don't want to be.
This is when winning gets boring.
Yeah. I don't want to be a Philistine. I want to be a feminist. And that's when I changed my life. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined. Well, not this topic specifically, but cultural generally. God forbid we have to talk about dodgeball anymore. Scott Powell, senior fellow at Discovery Institute in Seattle. And ironically, I wonder if he is a Marion Young acolyte. He is a University of Chicago alum. Oh. He's written a piece at The Spectator, spectator.org. Far more than a cultural war rages in America. Don't tell that to our friend Noah Rothman, who I had this very curious discussion with yesterday. But
did you guys go out to lunch and keep that conversation going?
I don't know. I don't know what's happening. Scott Powell, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
So you're a piece in The Spectator. You talk about the politics of division and the hatred and sort of politics of personal destruction and all those matters that are routinely discussed as part of the quote-unquote culture war. But you get to something you suggest is deeper, and it's very specific, and it's the war on Christianity, that it's the effort to expunge Christianity that is the deeper, more problematic battle that is being fought.
Yes, that's right.
So just to develop that for us a little bit in terms of what you see versus in terms of what's fundamental versus maybe some of the manifestations of the cultural conflicts.
Well, Christianity has been under attack really throughout the 20th century, but the battle is getting more intense. And I think as Americans, we have to recognize that even if we're not Christian, and indeed the founders did not envision a country that would, even though the founders were Christians, they set up a secular government that would be tolerant and allow for people of all faiths or no faith to live in peace and work together for the common good. And we have seen that eroding right before our very eyes in the last several decades. Yeah.
I mean, the erosion. And again, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but we were not in agreement. Myself and Noah Rothman. Marriage redefinition, gender, junk science on gender, the incidence of illegitimacy. I mean, these are public policy concerns, but they're also spiritual matters.
They certainly are. And it may be that that there is no political solution for many of our problems, that we keep looking to Washington, to politicians, to government to solve these growing problems when, in fact, the real solutions lie in the spiritual realm of life, in the cultural and spiritual realm of life. So if we continue down the path of destroying the foundation that gave us peace and solidarity and a sense of community, we can't expect there to be a political solution to that, and we will evolve into a greater chaos.
So when you see, like this week, there was the story out about a group in Boston wants to do a straight pride parade in response to a gay pride parade, it seems to me they're missing the point. All you're doing is responding to the ignorance of identity politics with identity politics. And so you're actually furthering the left's premise by engaging in the other side of the same coin in terms of activity. You're not getting to anything fundamental. You're not presenting sort of a fork in the road.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, when the game is being played by rules that are unfair, you don't want to necessarily engage in that game, but approach things differently from a bigger perspective. And I think history gives us that perspective. It's just, when we divorce our current culture and our thinking and our approach to life from what has worked for hundreds and thousands of years, we are embarking on a suicide course, really.
I mean,
because people learn from failure. They learn from their mistakes. And in fact, failure and mistakes may be the greatest source of learning. And as you learn from failure, you don't repeat those mistakes.
Well, some mistakes get repeated. You wrote in your article about anti-Semitic prejudice and intolerance. Is it on the rise in the U.S.?
It certainly is.
And what are some concrete examples of that?
Well, we've had two cases of attempted mass murder at synagogues. The most recent one was a few months ago, or maybe less than 2 months ago, in Powell, California. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, there was a hero there that was able to bring down the shooter. But the other terrorist event, I think, there were a dozen people killed, I think.
Right, at the synagogue in Pittsburgh.
That's right, yes.
So you write, what's needed now is an awakening and spiritual revival within Christianity that acts as a positive force throughout America. That revival would not only inspire believers and reach non-believers, it would help the silent majority and less engaged people whose yearnings may be simple, such as the return of civility, satisfaction, and joy that comes from being more authentically connected with people and with the nation's profound heritage. That spiritual awakening, after a society has sort of descended into decadence, in part brought on by affluence, where everybody's living their truth and so on and so forth, as Charles Murray said, where people don't preach what they practice. Is there an example of a society as diverse as ours that has actually come back to God and its foundational values in a positive way after having departed from them?
Well, certainly ancient Israel came back to God.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah.
And I believe in Great Britain you had a spiritual revival after a period of decadence. And we've had spiritual revivals in the United States in earlier times that were quite powerful forces.
Is it possible that the pro-life movement, even though this is going to be very contentious over the next 24 months as some of these laws are litigated and perhaps made their way to the Supreme Court for revisiting of Roe v. Wade, but is it possible that that could be a spark for
absolutely.
revival?
Absolutely. I don't think we should think of a spiritual revival as being in any one place or in any one cause. It can be very broad and have many, if you will, centers and many tracks.
And so then necessarily, I mean, there needs to be some sort of organizing principle around it. I mean, maybe principle is the wrong word. Organizing event, organizing issue, organizing rhetorical, intellectual battle. And it seems to me at present, the only one that's really being waged on something approximating equal footing is the battle over the sanctity of unborn life.
Yes. And in some ways, that is the core of a spiritual revival, isn't it? I mean, if we believe in life, we believe in purpose, and we believe in life, then therein lies that original insight, if you will, that original purpose for creation, and that I would say is a very powerful force. As that awareness grows, and we have to some extent thank science for showing us. Technology now has enabled people to see life at a very early stage in the womb. And 30 years ago, 40 years ago, people had really no concept of what was going on in the womb.
Yeah,
that it was just
40 years ago, premature babies couldn't live, at 26 weeks, 24 weeks. We're here.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, medical advances, science, changing people's hearts and minds. True. He is Scott Powell, senior fellow at the Discovery Institute in Seattle. He's also University of Chicago grad. His piece, spectator.org, Far More Than a Cultural War Rages in America, which I'll tweet out at Dan Proft. Scott, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
You've made the switch, and it feels so good. You've switched to Chicago.